Girls, I'm going to Harvard.
Why?
Class schedule, map, book list. Your what?
Social events. Okay. Has Warner Huntington III checked in yet?
Wish me luck, Bruiser. This is my first class as a serious loss.
I worked so hard to get into law school.
Would you rather have a client who committed a crime malum in se?
I'm Elle Woods, Miss Bonafante's attorney.
Come again?
Sometime in the 20 minutes that you were in the shower.
I believe the witness has made it clear that she was in the shower.
23 years ago, a woman walked into a courtroom wearing pink, armed with nothing but a knowledge of perm maintenance and an unshakable belief that she belonged there, and every single person in that room laughed at her. And then she won. And here is the part that still bothers me, the part that almost nobody talks about when they look back at Legally Blonde. She did not win by becoming smarter. She was never dumb. She won by refusing to carve off the parts of herself that other people found inconvenient. That distinction changes everything about what this movie actually is. Because if you grew up believing this film was a fun little comedy about a sorority girl who accidentally gets into Harvard Law, you were sold a postcard of something much more complicated and much more furious underneath. This is a story about what happens when an entire institution looks at a whole, complete, intelligent human being and says, you are only allowed to be here if you become a smaller version of yourself. And the real question the film asks, the one it buries under pink outfits and chihuahua handbags, is whether you can succeed in a world that demands you fragment yourself without actually losing the pieces they told you to cut away. Most people watch Legally Blonde and walk away saying, girl power, fun movie, great Reese Witherspoon performance. And they are not wrong. But they are not seeing the scene where a professor puts his hand on a student's thigh and calls it mentorship. They are not seeing the moment where the heroine's entire identity collapses not because she failed a test, but because the one person who was supposed to see her clearly looked at her and said she was not enough. They are not hearing the argument the film is making about who gets to define what intelligence looks like and what it costs a person to let someone else hold that pen. So we are going to go through this film properly, not the postcard, the actual architecture. Every decision Elle Woods makes, we are going to ask why. Every person who underestimates her, we are going to ask what they are protecting. And that ending, the one everyone remembers as triumphant, we are going to pull apart and examine whether it is actually the victory we were told it is, or whether it is something more complicated, more bittersweet, and more honest than a graduation speech. Buckle in. This is not the review you have seen before. This video is an independent, transformative work created for review, criticism, commentary, educational, informational, and entertainment purposes. Any third-party content is used only to support original analysis and is not intended to replace or reproduce the original work. And to understand where this film is going, you have to understand exactly where it starts, because the opening of Legally Blonde is doing something genuinely sneaky that most first-time viewers never register. Director Robert Luketic gives us Elle Woods in her natural habitat, Kula, her sorority house, her pink convertible, her tiny chihuahua Bruiser riding shotgun like a furry co-pilot, and he shoots it all with the same warm, golden, slightly overexposed glow of a perfume commercial. Everything is soft, everything is pretty, everything is, on the surface, frictionless, and the audience is being trained, in those first 5 minutes, to do exactly what every other character in this film will do. Look at Elle Woods and see only the surface. See the blonde hair, the pink wardrobe, the Valley Girl cadence, acquaintance and file her under not serious. But watch what Reese Witherspoon is actually doing in those early scenes. Watch how she manages the sorority sisters, how she reads the room, how she negotiates, how she solves problems in real time with a social intelligence that the screenplay never once calls attention to because it wants you to miss it the same way the world misses it. Elle is not dumb. Elle is operating at a high level in a domain that the people around her, and frankly, the audience, have been conditioned not to respect. And that conditioning is the entire engine of this movie. The film needs you to carry that same bias so that every time someone dismisses her, you feel the injustice land in your own chest because you would have dismissed her too. Luketic knows that. Amanda Brown, who wrote the novel this is based on, lived that. And Reese Witherspoon, who fought to make sure this character was never played as a punchline, understood it in her bones. Then Warner Huntington III arrives, and the film executes the single most important scene in its entire structure, and I need you to understand why this scene is not just a breakup. Warner sits Elle down at a restaurant, a fancy one, a serious one, a restaurant that says, I am about to say something adult, and he tells her he cannot marry her because she is not serious enough. And watch what happens to Elle's face in that moment. It is not confusion. It is not anger. Not yet. It is recognition. Because somewhere underneath all the pink, Elle has always known that the world might look at her and see a decoration instead of a person. Warner just made the fear real. He took the thing she hoped was only in her head and gave it a voice and a name and a face that she loved. And the psychology here is critical. Elle does not cry because she lost a boyfriend. She cries because the person whose opinion she trusted most in the world just confirmed her deepest, most private suspicion that she might be exactly what everyone else says she is. That maybe the wholeness she feels inside is an illusion, and the fragments the world wants her to be are all she actually is. Warner does not just break her heart, he breaks her mirror. And everything Elle does for the next 90 minutes of this film is an attempt to glue that mirror back together. So she does the thing that every person who has been told you are not enough does. She decides to become the thing that was demanded of her. Harvard Law. Not because she wants to be a lawyer. Not because she has a passion for constitutional jurisprudence. She goes to Harvard because Warner is there, and Warner said she was not serious. And the only way to prove him wrong is to walk into his world and survive it. And this is where the film makes a choice that separates it from almost every other underdog story. Elle does not go to Harvard and discover a hidden talent for law. She goes to Harvard and is immediately, brutally, systematically dismantled. The LSAT scene is played for comedy, sure, but the comedy is built on genuine humiliation. She scores a 179. That is not a joke number. That is a number that says, objectively, by the metrics this institution uses, you do not belong here. And then she gets in anyway, because the admissions committee watches her video essay and sees something the numbers cannot capture. But notice, the system still makes her audition, still makes her perform, still makes her prove she is more than a score. And when Elle walks onto that Harvard campus, when she steps out of that pink convertible into a sea of gray and navy and black, the camera lingers on her for one beat longer than it needs to. One beat where she is surrounded, visually swallowed, by an environment that was not built for her and does not want her there. And she smiles. And that smile is the bravest thing in the entire movie, because it is the smile of a person who has just walked into a room that will spend the next 2 years trying to erase her, and she has decided, before anyone can say a word, that she is going to make them look at her anyway. And then the first day of class arrives, and Robert Luketic stages it like a horror movie dressed in academic robes. Elle walks into that lecture hall wearing a pink fuzzy pen, a pink notebook, a pink everything, and the camera pulls back to show her as a single bright in an ocean of dark blazers and serious faces. Professor Stromwell, played by Holland Taylor with the precise, surgical coldness of a woman who has buried 1,000 students under her expectations, begins calling on students. And she calls on Elle and asks her about the case law. And Elle, who has not yet learned the language of this institution, who does not yet know how to perform seriousness in the way this room demands, stumbles. She gives an answer that is not wrong in spirit, but is wrong in vocabulary, wrong in register, wrong in the specific academic dialect that this room speaks. And the class laughs. Not a cruel laugh, not exactly. Worse than that, a dismissive laugh, the kind that says, you are not one of us, and you never will be, and we find your presence here gently, politely amusing. And watch Reese Witherspoon's face in that moment. She does not cry. She does not get angry. She smiles. A small, tight, controlled smile that says, I will survive this. And that smile is a mask, and the film knows it. And if you have ever been the only person in a room who looked different, sounded different, came from a different world than everyone else, you know exactly what that smile costs. But here is the detail most viewers miss. Vivian Kensington, played by Selma Blair with a stillness that is somehow more threatening than open hostility, is watching. Vivian is Warner's new girlfriend. Vivian is everything Elle is not. Dark-haired, quiet, academically fluent, already fluent in the language of this institution. And Vivian is not laughing. Vivian is assessing. Because Vivian recognizes Elle not as a joke, but as a threat, and that recognition is the seed of everything Vivian will do for the rest of this film. She does not hate Elle because Elle is dumb. She hates Elle because Elle might be something Vivian cannot be, something that cannot be taught or studied or earned through years of careful preparation. Elle is unapologetically herself in a room that demands apology, and that terrifies Vivian more than any test score ever could. So Elle does what the film frames as a montage, but what is actually a psychological self-erasure. She buys the laptop, she gets the glasses, she pulls her hair back, she stops going to parties, she locks herself in the library, and she studies and studies and studies, and the soundtrack shifts from pop to something quieter, more determined, more alone. And the audience is meant to cheer here. We are meant to think, good for her. She is working hard. She is proving them wrong. But stop for a moment and look at what the film is actually showing. Elle is not discovering law. Elle is not falling in love with jurisprudence or finding a passion she never knew she had. Elle is sanding down every edge of herself that this institution finds objectionable. The pink is going. The voice is flattening. The social warmth that was her actual superpower is being locked in a drawer because the room told her it was not real intelligence. And this is the moment where Legally Blonde becomes something more than a comedy, because it is showing, in real time, the cost of code switching. The cost of walking into a space and deciding that the only way to survive is to become a smaller, quieter, less colorful version of yourself. And the film does not let you ignore that cost. It lingers on Elle alone in the library at 2 in the morning. It shows her missing calls from her sorority sisters. It shows Bruiser looking up at her from his little bed, confused about why his person is different now. And then Emmett Richmond walks in. Luke Wilson plays Emmett with a quietness that is almost invisible the first time you watch the film, and that is the point. Emmett does not rescue Elle. Emmett does not teach her the law. Emmett simply looks at her, in the middle of her self-erasure project, and treats her like a person. Not a project, not a joke, not a challenge, a person. And he says something small, something kind, something that does not ask her to perform. And Elle, who has been holding her breath for days, exhales. Just a little. Just enough for the audience to see that somewhere under all the studying and the new glasses and the pulled back hair, the woman from the opening scene is still in there, waiting. But the institution does not care about waiting. The institution has a schedule, and the schedule says that by the end of the first semester, Elle Woods must either belong here or she must go. And this is where the film introduces Professor Callahan, played by Victor Garber, with the warm, paternal authority of a man who has never once questioned whether the world was built specifically for him. Callahan is not introduced as a villain. He is introduced as a mentor. He is introduced as the gatekeeper who can open doors, and Elle, desperate for any door, walks toward him with gratitude. And this is important because the film needs you to trust Callahan before it pulls the floor out. It needs you to believe, as Elle believes, that if she can just perform well enough, study hard enough, become serious enough, the system will reward her. That is the lie Harvard is selling her. That is the lie every institution sells the people it grinds down. If you just become what we need you to be, we will let you in. And the film is setting up the moment where that lie will be exposed, where the transaction will be revealed for what it actually is. But that moment is not here yet. Here, in Act 1, the lie still holds. Elle still believes that the answer is to work harder, to be quieter, to be less pink, less loud, less Elle. And the audience watches her believe it, and we believe it with her, because we have been taught the same lie. Work hard, conform, earn your seat. And if the seat still is not offered, the problem must be you. That is the architecture of the first act. That is the cage the film builds around its heroine before it lets her see the bars. And there is one more scene in this section that most people remember as a throwaway joke, but that is actually doing enormous structural work. The party scene. Elle is invited to a costume party, and she shows up in a Playboy bunny outfit because she misunderstood the assignment, because she was not given the same information everyone else received, because Vivian told her it was a costume party without specifying the theme. And the room erupts, and Elle stands there, in pink bunny ears and a white leotard, and every single person in that room sees her exactly the way Warner saw her, as a joke, as a decoration, as a woman who does not understand the rules because she was never meant to be here. And the film lets that moment sit. It does not rush past it. It holds on Elle's face while the laughter washes over her, and you can see her recalculating everything she thought she knew about this place, these people, herself. And then she leaves. And the next morning, she is back in the library, and she is studying harder, and she is not smiling. And the film does not play this as determination. It plays it as damage, because that is what it is. Every time this institution humiliates Elle, she responds by trying to become more of what the institution wants and less of what she actually is. And the film is tracking that erosion, scene by scene, smile by smile, until the audience starts to feel, somewhere in their gut, that this strategy cannot hold, that something has to give, that the woman in the pink convertible cannot keep shrinking forever without reaching a point where there is nothing left to shrink into. And that point is coming. Hold on to that feeling, because the next section of this film is where the walls start closing in, and the person Elle has been trying so desperately to become is about to cost her the one thing she cannot afford to lose. And there is one more thread in this opening stretch that the film plants quietly, almost carelessly, the way you hide a key under a doormat, expecting no one to look down. It is the relationship between Elle and Paulette, the nail technician played by Jennifer Coolidge, in a performance so naturally, effortlessly funny that it is easy to overlook how structurally essential she is. Paulette appears early in a salon, doing Elle's nails before Harvard, and she reappears later when Elle needs a break from the library, a break from the gray walls and the case briefs and the relentless pressure to be someone she is not. And what Paulette represents, what the film is using her to say without ever saying it aloud, is the world Elle came from. The world that does not ask you to cite precedent before you are allowed to speak. The world where intelligence is social, where reading a room matters as much as reading a statute, where a woman can be kind and loud and uncertain and still be whole. Paulette is not a comic relief character. She is a lifeline. Every time Elle sits in that salon chair, every time Paulette talks about her ex-husband or her dating disasters or her dream of finding a man who appreciates her, the film is reminding Elle and the audience that there is a version of life where you do not have to earn your place by passing an exam, where you are allowed to be yourself without footnotes. And Elle needs that reminder more than she knows, because the longer she stays inside Harvard's walls, the more that other life starts to feel like a dream she had before she woke up into this gray, fluorescent, high-stakes reality. But here is the thing about Paulette that elevates her beyond function. Paulette sees Elle, not the Harvard version, not the girl trying to become a lawyer. Elle, the woman who likes pink, who talks too fast, who brings her dog everywhere, who cries at commercial breaks. Paulette sees all of that and does not ask her to edit any of it. And in a film where almost every other character is either demanding that Elle change or punishing her for refusing to, Paulette's unconditional acceptance becomes the emotional anchor the audience did not know they needed. It is the proof that Elle's original self is not a performance, not a phase, not something to outgrow. It is real, and it is enough, and someone in this story believes that without condition. And the film tucks this truth into the first act like a seed in soil, because it knows that later, much later, when the ground gets torn open and everything Elle thought she knew about herself collapses, she is going to need to remember that someone once looked at her and said, without hesitation, "You are fine exactly as you are." And that memory is going to matter, more than any case law, more than any grade, more than Warner Huntington III and his serious life. Hold on to Paulette. Hold on to what she means, because the film is about to take everything else away, and when it does, that salon chair, that friendship, that unconditional seeing is going to be the one thing Elle has left that Harvard cannot grade, cannot mock, and cannot take from her. And that is where Act 1 closes. Not with triumph, not with a victory lap, with a woman sitting in a nail salon, getting a fresh coat of pink, trying to remember who she was before the world told her she had to be someone else. And the pink, for now, is enough. But the walls are closing in, and the next act is where they start to crack. And then the film pivots, and everything changes, and it changes because of a murder. Brooke Taylor Wyndham, a fitness guru and television personality, is accused of killing her husband, and Professor Callahan takes the case as a teaching opportunity for his best students. This is the moment the screenplay shifts from survival story into something with actual stakes beyond Elle's personal validation, because now there is a woman in a cell whose life depends on the people in this room getting it right. And Callahan selects his team, and Elle makes it. And I need you to sit with what that selection means psychologically, because the film does not let Elle celebrate it. She does not pump her fist. She does not call her sorority sisters. She stands very still and looks at Callahan and says thank you in a voice that is trying not to shake. Because being chosen by the institution that spent weeks telling her she did not belong creates a specific, complicated emotion that the film understands perfectly, gratitude laced with suspicion. She is grateful, and she is also thinking, why now? What changed? Did I become enough, or did you just run out of other options? And Vivian, who also made the team, watches Elle receive the news with an expression that Selma Blair plays at exactly the right temperature. Not rage, not disbelief, but a cold, quiet recalculation. Vivian has been operating under the assumption that Elle is a temporary problem, a diversity admission, a joke that will correct itself. And now the joke is standing next to her on the same case, with the same access, the same responsibility. And Vivian realizes, in that moment, that she cannot wait for Elle to fail. She has to make sure of it. The investigation begins, and this is where Legally Blonde does something genuinely radical for a studio comedy in 2001. It gives its heroine a superpower, but the superpower is not legal knowledge. It is not case precedent. It is everything Elle already knew before she ever set foot in Harvard. The team is interviewing witnesses, reviewing evidence, building timelines, and everyone is approaching it like lawyers. Clinical, detached, analytical, and Elle approaches it like Elle. She notices the hair. She notices the clothes. She notices that a witness's alibi involves a perm appointment, and she knows, because she has lived in the world of salons and chemicals and processing times, that you cannot get a perm and go swimming in the same window the prosecution claims. And the room goes quiet, and Callahan looks at her, and for the first time, he does not look through her. He looks at her, and the audience feels that shift like a physical thing, because we have been waiting for it, waiting for someone in this institution to see what we have always seen, which is that Elle Woods was never missing intelligence. She was missing a context that valued the intelligence she already had. And this is the film's thesis arriving not as a speech, but as a plot point. The thing they mocked her for is the thing that cracks the case. And Reese Witherspoon plays the moment without triumph. She plays it with relief. The relief of a person who has been holding her breath for weeks and can finally exhale because someone said, yes, that thing you do, that matters. But the film is smart enough to know that one good moment does not erase a system. And so it gives us the bend and snap. If you have seen Legally Blonde, you know this scene. Emmett is coaching Elle on how to present herself in court, how to command a room, how to stop apologizing for taking up space. And he tells her about the bend and snap, this physical gesture, this tiny performance of confidence. And Elle practices it in the mirror, and it is funny, and it is charming, and the audience laughs. But underneath the comedy, this scene is doing something quietly devastating. Emmett is teaching Elle to perform authority, not to have it, to perform it. Because in this world, having authority is not enough if you do not look like authority, do not sound like authority, do not move like authority. And Elle, who has spent her entire life being told her natural self is not authoritative enough, now has to learn a choreography of power, a set of gestures, a script, and the film frames it as empowerment, and it is, but it is also a wound. Because the subtext is, you cannot walk into that courtroom as yourself. You must walk in as a version of yourself that has been approved. And Elle learns the choreography, and she nails it, and the audience cheers. And somewhere underneath the cheering, there is a small, quiet sadness that the film trusts you to feel without explaining. And then Warner reappears, not as the boyfriend, not as the man who broke her, as a classmate, a colleague, a person standing on the same team, working the same case, breathing the same recycled air in the same windowless study room. And the film does not make this easy. It does not let Elle be over him in a clean, triumphant way, because grief does not work like that. Because the person who told you that you were not enough does not stop mattering just because you prove them wrong. Warner is there, and he is competent, and he is trying. And occasionally he looks at Elle with something that might be respect, or might be guilt, or might be the dawning, uncomfortable recognition that he misread her completely. And Elle has to navigate that while also navigating Vivian, who is sharpening her knives in silence, while also navigating Callahan, who is warm and paternal and keeps his hand just a little too close to her shoulder during strategy meetings. And the film stacks all of this pressure into the second act like weights on a chest. Every scene adds another pound. Every interaction asks Elle to be more, perform more, prove more. And the audience can feel the weight accumulating, can feel the breaking point approaching, because the film is building towards something. Not a triumph. Not yet. Something worse. Something that will take everything Elle has built in this gray-walled institution and set it on fire. And it is coming from the one person she trusted most. Hold on to that, because the next section of this film is where the floor drops out, and no amount of studying, no amount of bend and snap, no amount of pink courage is going to prepare her for what happens next. The investigation takes the team off campus and into the world, and this is where the film visually opens up for the first time since Elle arrived at Harvard, and the shift is not accidental. Luketic has kept Elle trapped in gray interiors for weeks. Lecture halls, libraries, study rooms, the same fluorescent hum pressing down on every scene. And now, suddenly, there is sunlight, there is a highway, there is a destination beyond these walls. The team is driving to interview a witness named Chutney, a woman who was present at the Wyndham house on the night of the murder and who has information that could shift the entire timeline. And the scene that follows is one of the most important in the film because it is the first time Elle operates in a legal context without translating herself. She walks into Chutney's home and she does not put on the glasses. She does not flatten her voice. She does not perform the version of herself that Harvard demanded. She sits down and she talks to Chutney the way Elle talks to everyone, with warmth, with curiosity, with an instinctive understanding that people reveal the truth not when they are interrogated, but when they feel seen. And Chutney talks, and what she says about the perm, about the timing, about about the chemical process and the water exposure, confirms everything Elle already suspected but could not prove inside the sterile walls of Callahan's office. And the team watches Elle extract this information with the ease of someone who has been doing this her whole life, just in different rooms, with different stakes, in a language no one here thought counted as fluency. And there is a moment, just after Chutney finishes talking, where Emmett looks at Elle, and his expression is not surprise. It is recognition. The look of a person seeing something they always suspected confirmed for the first time. And Elle catches him looking, and she does not smile triumphantly. She smiles small, private, because for the first time in this entire film, she did not have to become someone else to be useful. She just had to be Elle. And the feeling of that, the relief, the validation, the quiet, aching gratitude of being enough without footnotes, is so specific and so true that it lands in the chest of every viewer who has ever had to code switch to survive a room. And this is where the relationship between Elle and Emmett shifts from collegial to something the film handles with unusual tenderness for a studio comedy. They start talking, not about the case, about themselves, about what it feels like to be underestimated, to be placed in a box by people who decided what you were before you finished a sentence. And Luke Wilson plays Emmett in these scenes with a stillness that invites Elle to fill the silence, to say the thing she has not said to anyone at Harvard, which is that she is tired. Not physically tired, soul tired, tired of performing, tired of walking into every room and doing the mental calculus of what version of herself will be acceptable today. And Emmett does not fix it. He does not say, "You don't have to do that." He simply listens, and then he says something about his own experience, something about being overlooked, about being the quiet one in a room full of loud ones, about the specific loneliness of being competent but invisible. And the two of them sit in that shared understanding, and the camera holds on them in a medium 2 shot, not close enough to force intimacy, not far enough to deny it. And the audience feels the possibility of something real between them, not the performative romance of Warner, which was always about what Elle could be for him. Something mutual, something where both people are allowed to be unfinished. And the film lets this connection breathe, does not rush it, does not punctuate it with a kiss or a declaration. Just two people in a quiet room, seeing each other clearly for the first time. And that quietness is its own kind of radical act in a movie that the world insists on calling a comedy. Because Legally Blonde, in these moments, is not funny. It is gentle, and it trusts the audience to understand that gentleness is not weakness. It is the thing Elle has been starving for since Warner sat her down in that restaurant and told her she was not enough. But the film will not let gentleness last without testing it, and the test arrives wearing Vivian Kensington's face. There is a scene, and it varies slightly depending on which cut of the film you watch, where Vivian confronts Elle, not with shouting, not with overt cruelty, but with the precise, surgical condescension of a woman who has built her entire identity on being the smartest person in the room and is watching someone else walk in and be it naturally, effortlessly, without any of the years of grinding and sacrificing that Vivian endured. And what Vivian says, underneath the academic language, underneath the passive-aggressive politeness, is this: I earned my place here. I bled for it. I gave up everything to become what this institution required. And you walked in wearing pink and skipped the suffering, and somehow you are standing where I am standing, and that is not fair. And the film does not villainize Vivian for this. And that is important, because Vivian is not wrong that the system demanded a price from her. She is wrong that the price she paid should be the only path. She is wrong that Elle's different route invalidates her own. And the tragedy of Vivian, the thing the film plants and trusts you to find, is that she is what happens when an institution successfully convinces a person that conformity is the same as worth. Vivian is not Elle's enemy. Vivian is what Elle would become if she let Harvard finish its work on her, if she let the pink go entirely, if she let the salon, the sorority, the chihuahua, the laugh, the warmth, all of it, get sanded away until only the gray remained. And Selma Blair plays that tragedy in the set of her jaw, in the way she holds her shoulders, in the absolute absence of ease in her body. Vivian has won every test and lost every joy. And the film shows you that cost without asking you to forgive her for what she does next. And what she does next is connected to Callahan, because the pressure in this film is not distributed evenly, and it is not random. It flows downward, from the top of the hierarchy to the bottom. And at the top sits Professor Callahan, who has been warm, who has been mentoring, who has been placing his hand on Elle's shoulder during strategy sessions in a way that the film frames, in these earlier scenes, as avuncular, fatherly, safe. And the film needs you to believe that, needs you to file Callahan under ally, so that when the mask comes off, the betrayal lands with the full force of trust violated. But in this section, in these scenes leading up to the turning point, the film starts leaving breadcrumbs. A hand that lingers a beat too long. A comment about Elle's appearance that is framed as a compliment but sits wrong in the mouth. A private meeting that is called after hours, in an office, office, behind a closed door, for reasons that are framed as academic but feel, in the staging, in the lighting, in the way Luketic positions the camera at a slight Dutch angle, like something else. And the audience starts to feel it before Elle does. That low, creeping unease, the sense that the room is not safe, that the mentor is not a mentor, that the institution which promised to reward Elle for becoming what it wanted is about to show her what it actually wants. And Elle does not see it yet. She is still in the mode of gratitude, of proving herself, of being so focused on earning her place that she does not register the danger until it is already in the room with her. And the film lets the tension build, scene by scene, frame by frame. The score drops lower, the lighting gets colder, the spaces get smaller, and the audience sits in their chairs and thinks, no, not him, please, not him. And the film hears that thought, and it does not care, because this is the moment it has been building toward. The moment where the system stops pretending to be meritocratic and shows its actual face. And it is coming. The next section of this film is where the floor drops out from under everything Elle Woods has built, and no amount of preparation, no amount of case knowledge, no amount of bend and snap will save her from what happens in that office. This is the moment the film stops being a comedy, and it does not stop for a long, long time. And there is a small scene buried in this stretch of the film that almost no one remembers, but that functions as the emotional hinge of the entire second act. Elle is alone in her dorm room. It is late. The case files are spread across her desk. Bruiser is asleep on the bed, and Elle picks up the phone and calls her mother. And the conversation is brief. 2 minutes, maybe less, and nothing dramatic happens in it. Her mother asks how school is going. Elle says it is going fine. Her mother asks if she is eating. Elle says yes. Her mother asks if she met anyone nice. And Elle almost says Emmett's name, and then does not. And the silence that follows is loaded with everything Elle cannot say. Everything she is processing alone. The fear, the exhaustion, the creeping suspicion that the person she is becoming in these gray hallways is a stranger. And her mother, in her limited, slightly bewildered, loving way, says something like, well, sweetie, you always did have a way of figuring things out. And Elle says, yeah, Mom. And she hangs up, and she sits in the silence of that room. And the camera holds on her face for 4 seconds. Just 4 seconds. And in those 4 seconds, Reese Witherspoon shows you the entire cost of this journey without a single line of dialogue. The loneliness of being in a place where no one knew you before. The grief of outgrowing a life you loved because someone told you it was not enough. The exhaustion of performing competence in a language that still feels foreign in your mouth. And then Elle picks up a case file, and she starts reading again, and the scene ends. And it is a tiny moment, a nothing moment, the kind of scene that gets trimmed in test screenings because it does not advance the plot, does not deliver a joke, does not move the case forward. And Robert Luketic fought to keep it in, and he was right, because without that phone call, without those 4 seconds of silence, Elle Woods becomes a plot mechanism, a vehicle for beats, and with it, she is a person, a specific, lonely, tired person sitting in a dorm room in Cambridge, Massachusetts, wondering if the version of herself she left in Los Angeles is still there, waiting, or if she has already been overwritten. And this is what the film understands about transformation that so many underdog stories miss. The montage gets the applause. The library scenes get the inspirational soundtrack. But the actual experience of becoming someone new is mostly quiet, mostly lonely, mostly a series of small, unglamorous moments where you sit alone and wonder if the trade was worth it. And Legally Blonde gives you those moments. Not many, but enough. Enough to make you feel the weight. Enough to make the eventual triumph, when it comes, cost something. Because a victory that is not preceded by genuine suffering is just an event. And this film is not interested in events. It is interested in the person underneath them. The woman behind the pink. The human behind the headline. And that woman is tired. And she is scared. And she is about to walk into a room where the one person she trusted in this institution is going to show her that trust was the wrong currency all along. And the film needs you to feel her exhaustion before that happens. Needs you to understand that she has already given everything she has. That there is nothing left in reserve. That when the blow lands, and it is going to land, and it is going to land from the direction she least expects, she will not have the energy to deflect it. She will take the full weight of it, and the audience will take it with her. Because by now, for acts deep, we are not watching Elle Woods. We are in there with her. We are sitting in that dorm room. We are holding that phone. We are listening to the silence after the click, and we are not ready for what comes next. But the film does not care if we are ready. The film has a door to open, and behind that door is the moment that breaks everything. The moment that makes the ending matter. The moment that separates this film from every other story about a woman proving herself in a man's world. Because this is not about proving herself anymore. This is about surviving the proof. And the next act begins the moment she walks through that door. And then she walks into the office, and the door closes, and the film changes. Everything up to this point in Legally Blonde has been building toward this single, contained, 3-minute scene, and Robert Luketic stages it with a restraint that makes it more terrifying than anything explicit could be. Callahan's office is warm, wood-paneled, books on the shelves, a desk lamp casting a golden glow that makes the room feel safe, paternal, like a study in a home you grew up in. And Callahan is behind the desk, and he calls Elle in, and he tells her she has done excellent work on the case, and he says it warmly, and he means it, and that is what makes it so much worse. Because the compliment is real, the respect for her legal mind is real, and then he stands up, and he walks around the desk, and he puts his hand on her waist, and the room does not change, the lighting does not shift, the music does not swell. The film simply holds the camera steady and lets the gesture exist in the same warm, golden, safe-looking room, and that is the horror of it. Because Callahan is not attacking her, he is not yelling, he is not threatening, he is touching her, and he is smiling, and he is saying her name in a voice that sounds like a father's. And the film understands that this is how power actually operates in rooms like this. Not with violence, with warmth, with the assumption that the hand on the waist is a reward, not a violation. That the mentorship was always a transaction, and Elle simply did not know the price until this moment. And Reese Witherspoon plays Elle's reaction with a specificity that should be studied in every acting class. She does not scream. She does not slap him. She freezes, and then she smiles, and then she backs toward the door, and then she says goodnight in a voice that is steady and small and completely, totally empty. And she walks out, and the door closes behind her, and the camera stays on the closed door for 2 full seconds before it cuts. And those 2 seconds are the loudest silence in the entire film. And this is the moment, the all is lost moment. Not the test she failed in the first week, not the bunny costume, not the laughter in the lecture hall. Those were humiliations. This is something else entirely. Because those moments attacked Elle's competence. They said, you are not smart enough, not serious enough, not Harvard enough. And Elle could fight those. She could study harder, prepare more, prove them wrong with a perm fact and a bend and snap. But Callahan's hand on her waist does not attack her competence. It attacks her personhood. It says, your mind is not why you are here. Your mind was never why you are here. You are here because of what I can take from you. And in that single gesture, every sacrifice Elle made to be in this institution is poisoned. Every hour in the library, every pink item she put away, every moment she swallowed her own voice to speak theirs. All of it reframed, all of it recontextualized. Because if Callahan sees her this way, then what was the studying for? What was the transformation for? What was the point of becoming what they demanded if the demand was never about her mind? And Elle walks down that hallway, and the camera follows her from behind, and her footsteps echo on the marble floor, and she does not cry. She does not run. She walks slowly, evenly, like a person in shock, like a person whose entire architecture of belief has just been kicked out from under her, and who is still standing through sheer mechanical momentum. And the audience sits in that hallway with her, and the audience does not breathe, because the film has spent 4 acts building Elle up, giving her tools, giving her victories, giving her the perm revelation and the bend and snap and Emmett's quiet faith. And it has built all of that so it could do this, so it could take it all away in a single hand on a waist. And the audience feels the theft, feels it personally, because every viewer who has ever been reduced, ever been made to feel that their value was something less than their full self, recognizes this hallway, knows this walk, knows the sound of your own footsteps when the thing you believed in turns out to be a lie. And Elle goes to Paulette. Of course she goes to Paulette. She does not go to Emmett. She does not go to her mother. She goes to the nail salon, and she sits in the chair, and she does not get her nails done. She just sits, and Paulette looks at her and knows. Does not ask, does not need to ask, just knows. The way you know when a person you love has been broken open. The way you can see it in the set of their shoulders, in the way they hold their hands in their lap like they do not know what to do with them. And Elle says, very quietly, I think I'm going to leave. And she does not say leave Harvard. She does not say leave the case. She says, I think I'm going to leave. And the word carries the weight of everything. Leave this version of herself. Leave the fight. Leave the belief that she can exist in this world as a whole person and be valued for it. And Paulette does not say, no, don't leave. You can do this. Paulette does not give a speech. Paulette reaches over and takes Elle's hand and holds it and says, okay, honey, if that's what you need. And that permission, the permission to quit, the permission to be done, the permission to stop fighting, is the most important thing anyone gives Elle in the entire film. Because you cannot choose to stay unless you are genuinely free to leave. And Paulette gives her that freedom, and Elle sits with it, and the film lets her sit with it. No montage, no inspirational music, just a woman in a nail salon, holding another woman's hand, breathing through the wreckage of everything she thought this journey was supposed to be. And then, the next morning, Elle goes back, not because of a speech, not because someone convinced her, not because the film needs her to. She goes back because she wakes up, and she looks at Bruiser, and she looks at the case files on her desk, and she thinks about Brooke Wyndham sitting in a cell, and she thinks about the perm, and she thinks about Chutney, and she thinks about the truth that is still sitting in those files, waiting for someone to pull it into the light. And she thinks, if I walk away now, the truth walks away with me. And Brooke Wyndham stays in that cell, and Callahan stays behind that desk. And the next Elle who walks into that office will not have anyone who knows the truth standing beside her. And that thought, that specific, concrete, other-directed thought, is what gets her out of bed. Not self-belief, not revenge, not proving Warner wrong. The knowledge that her leaving would cost someone else their freedom. And that is the most honest motivation the film could have written, because it is not triumphant. It is not empowering in the way a poster would be empowering. It is tired. It is reluctant. It is a woman putting on her shoes and walking back into a building that hurt her, because the alternative is letting the building hurt someone else. And she does not put on the glasses. She does not pull her hair back. She wears pink, not as armor, not as a statement, because it is hers, and she is done pretending it is not. And she walks toward that campus, and the camera is in front of her this time, not behind. And she is not walking away from something. She is walking toward it, and the audience feels the shift, feels it in their spine, because the film has just spent an entire act breaking Elle Woods down to the foundation, and now, in the cold light of a Tuesday morning, she is deciding to build back. Not the Harvard version, not the gray version, the pink version, the whole version, the version that was enough before anyone told her it was not. And that walk is the beginning of the third act. And the third act is where the film stops asking Elle to prove she belongs and starts asking the institution to prove it deserves her. And when Elle walks back into that study room the next morning, something is different, and the film does not announce it with a speech or a soundtrack swell. It announces it with silence. She walks in, and she sets her bag down, and she opens her case file, and she does not look at Callahan. She does not look for his approval. She does not scan the room to check whether she is performing seriousness correctly. She simply opens the file and starts reading, and the camera catches the faces of the other students as they register the change. Because the woman who walked into this room 3 weeks ago was asking permission to exist, the woman sitting here now is not asking anything. She is here. She is working. And the difference is visible in the set of her shoulders, in the steadiness of her hands, in the way she turns a page without checking whether anyone is watching. And Callahan enters, and he looks at Elle, and there is a beat, a single, loaded beat, where something passes between them. He knows that she knows. She knows that he knows that she knows. And the film does not dramatize this, does not give them a confrontation, does not let Elle throw the truth in his face, because that is not how power works in institutions. You do not get the confrontation. You get the silence. You get the handshake that lasts 1 second too long. You get the smile that does not reach the eyes. And Elle shakes his hand, and she sits down, and she goes back to work, and the audience understands that she has made a decision that is bigger than anger. She has decided that the case matters more than her wound. That Brooke Wyndham's freedom matters more than Elle's need for Callahan to acknowledge what he did. And that decision is not noble in a clean, cinematic way. It is exhausting. It is the decision of a person who has calculated the cost of her silence and decided that the cost of speaking is higher, because speaking would mean leaving the room, and leaving the room would mean leaving Brooke in that cell. And so she stays, and she works, and the film honors that choice by not making it easy, by letting the discomfort sit in every scene where Callahan is present, by letting the audience feel the effort it costs Elle to be in the same room as him and keep her eyes on the file. The trial begins, and Luketic shifts the visual language entirely. The courtroom is not the warm wood of Callahan's office. It is cold marble, high ceilings, fluorescent light that flattens every face into the same shade of institutional gray. And Brooke Wyndham sits at the defense table, and she is smaller than you expect. The fitness guru, the television personality, the woman who sold millions of workout videos. She is small here, diminished, wearing a suit that is too structured for her frame, sitting with her hands folded in her lap, looking at the jury with the expression of a person who has already started grieving her own life. And the prosecution lays out its case, and it is strong. Timeline, motive, opportunity. The husband was killed between 10 and 11 p.m. Brooke was in the house. Brooke had reason to be angry. The physical evidence places her in the room, and the jury watches, and the audience watches, and the film lets the prosecution be good, lets them be convincing, does not strawman the other side, because the stakes are only real if the threat is real. And Elle watches from the second chair, and she is taking notes, and her notes are not the same as everyone else's notes. Where the other students are writing down legal citations and procedural objections, Elle is writing down behaviors. The way a witness shifts weight, the way a sentence trails off, the way a hand moves to cover a mouth. She is reading the room the way she has always read rooms. And the film does not highlight this, does not underline it, just shows you her pen moving across the page while everyone else is looking at the judge. And you realize, watching her, that the courtroom is not a new environment for Elle. It is a new room in a house she has been navigating her whole life. The social architecture of a courtroom, who has power, who is performing, who is lying, who is terrified, is the same architecture she mastered in sorority recruitment, in salon conversations, in the careful management of a group of 20-year-old women who all wanted to be president of the same same organization, and she is fluent in this language. She always was. The institution just never bothered to learn her dialect, and the defense strategy begins to take shape, and Elle is at the center of it, and this is where the screenplay makes its boldest structural choice. It does not give Elle a single triumphant moment where she cracks the case wide open in front of everyone. Instead, it gives her a series of small, quiet contributions that accumulate. A question she suggests Emmett ask a witness. A timeline discrepancy she notices in the police report. The perm argument, refined and sharpened, becoming the backbone of the reasonable doubt strategy. And each contribution is met with a nod, a good catch, a brief acknowledgement, and then the team moves on. And the film shows you that this is what real competence looks like inside a system. Not a spotlight moment, not a standing ovation, just a steady, relentless accumulation of small truths that, taken together, build a wall the prosecution cannot climb over. And Vivian is there, working alongside Elle, and the tension between them has shifted. It is not friendship. It is not forgiveness. It is something more complicated. Vivian watches Elle work, and she sees that Elle is good, genuinely good, not good for a blonde, not good despite her background, good. And that recognition does something to Vivian that the film handles with quiet precision. It does not redeem her. It does not make her apologize, but it cracks something, a small fissure in the armor. And there is a moment during a late-night strategy session where Vivian hands Elle a file without being asked, and their fingers almost touch, and neither of them looks up, and the moment passes. And it is nothing, and it is everything, because it is the first time Vivian has treated Elle as a colleague rather than a threat, and the film trusts the audience to understand that in a world like this, that small shift is its own kind of revolution. And then comes the moment where Elle stands up, not in front of the jury, not in front of the judge, in front of the team, in the study room, late at night, and she says, "We're missing something," and everyone looks at her, and she walks to the whiteboard, and she lays it out. The perm, the timing, the chemical process, the fact that the prosecution's timeline is physically impossible if you understand what happens to hair when you apply ammonium thioglycolate and then submerge it in chlorinated water within the processing window. And she explains it in her own language, not legalese, not the flattened, careful register she adopted in the first act. Her language, the language of salons and sisterhood and 20 years of paying attention to things the world told her were frivolous. And the room goes quiet, and Callahan listens, and for the first time, he does not interrupt. And when she finishes, he says, "That's the argument," and the team builds around it. And the film holds on Elle's face for one moment after the meeting breaks up, and she is not smiling. She is not celebrating. She is breathing, just breathing, like a person who has been holding her breath for 3 acts and has finally been allowed to exhale. And the audience exhales with her, because this is what the film has been building toward, not a victory, a recognition. The moment where the institution looks at the woman it tried to reshape and says, without meaning to, "You were already whole, and the trial is tomorrow," and the argument is set. And Elle Woods is going to walk into that courtroom wearing pink, and she is going to use everything she is, everything they told her to cut away, and she is going to set Brooke Wyndham free. And the film is going to make you feel every single second of it. The morning of the trial arrives, and the film treats it the way it should, not with triumphant brass, not with a montage of Elle suiting up like a warrior donning armor, with quiet, with the small, unglamorous rituals of a person preparing to do the hardest thing she has ever done. Elle wakes up, she feeds Bruiser, she brushes her hair, she opens her closet, and the camera shows you the row of dark blazers she bought in the first act, the ones that were supposed to make her look like a lawyer, like a serious person, like someone who belonged in Harvard's gray halls. And she looks at them, and she reaches past them, and she pulls out pink, not a statement pink, not a costume pink, a soft, natural, lived-in pink that looks like it has been washed 100 times, like it belongs to her, like it grew on her body the way her hair grew on her head. And she puts it on, and she looks in the mirror, and the woman looking back is not the woman from the first act who was performing confidence, and she is not the woman from the second act who was erasing herself. She is someone new, someone who has been broken and rebuilt and has decided, in the quiet of a Tuesday morning, that the reconstruction will use the original materials. And she walks to the courthouse, and the camera is outside today. Natural light, no fluorescent hum, no marble walls pressing in, just a woman in pink walking down a sidewalk in the morning sun, and the shot is wide enough to show the sky above her, and the sky is blue, and it is open, and for the first time in this film, Elle Woods is not contained by a frame, and she walks through those courthouse doors, and the sound changes, the echo of the lobby, the murmur of people, the weight of the building settling around her like a held breath, and she finds her seat at the defense table next to Emmett, behind Callahan, and she looks at Brooke Wyndham, and Brooke looks back, and the two women share a moment that the film captures in a simple shot reverse shot. No dialogue, no nod, just 2 pairs of eyes saying, "I am here, we are doing this," and the jury files in, 12 faces, 12 strangers who will decide whether Brooke walks out of this building free or goes back to a cell, and the judge calls the court to order, and the trial begins. And the audience leans forward because they know what is coming, and they know it has been earned, and they know that nothing about this moment was given freely. The prosecution rests its case, and it is strong, and the film does not cheat. It does not make the prosecutor incompetent. It does not give them a silly argument to knock down. They present the timeline. They present the motive. They present the physical evidence. And the jury listens, and some of them nod, and the audience feels the weight of it, feels the possibility, the genuine, stomach-dropping possibility that this might not be enough, that the perm argument might not land, that the jury might hear ammonium thioglycolate and processing window and think it sounds absurd. And the defense rises, and Emmett presents the opening, calm and measured, laying the foundation. And then the witnesses are called, and then the perm argument is introduced carefully, methodically, the way you introduce a foreign concept to people who have never thought about hair chemistry in a legal context. And the film shows you the jury's faces, confusion at first, then curiosity, then, slowly, understanding. And Elle is watching their faces, reading them, the way she reads every room. And she sees the moment it clicks. The moment the juror in the third row tilts her head and her expression shifts from skepticism to realization. And Elle does not smile. She marks something in her notes. Because the work is not done. Because reasonable doubt is not a single moment. It is an accumulation. And the prosecution objects, and the judge sustains some, overrules others, and the legal machinery grinds forward, and the film shows you the texture of a trial. The tedium, the repetition, the way justice is not a lightning bolt but a slow, grinding, procedural thing, built one objection and one ruling and one witness at a time. And through all of it, Elle is present, not performing, not translating, just present, just watching, just thinking in the language she has always thought in, the language of people and patterns and the small physical truths that bodies tell when mouths are lying. And the film trusts you to see her, trusts you to understand that she is doing legal work, that this is what legal work looks like when it is done by a person who pays attention to human beings rather than abstractions. And then the cross-examination happens, and this is the scene the entire film has been engineering, and it arrives not with a shout, but with a question. The prosecution's key witness is on the stand, the person whose testimony places Brooke at the scene during the critical window, and the defense has established the perm timeline, has established the chemical impossibility, and now the witness is being asked to reconcile their story with the physical evidence, and the reconciliation is not working. The witness shifts, stumbles, looks at the prosecutor, looks back at the jury, and the film holds on that face, on the micro expressions of a person whose story is collapsing in real time, and you can see the architecture of the lie becoming visible, the scaffolding showing through the paint. And Emmett asks the question, a simple question, a quiet question, the kind of question that does not need volume because the answer is already written in the witness's eyes. And the witness answers, and the answer is not what the prosecution needed. And the courtroom exhales, not dramatically, not with a gasp, with a slow, collective release of breath, the sound of 12 jurors recalculating everything they thought they knew. And Brooke Wyndham, at the defense table, puts her hand over her mouth, and her eyes fill, and she does not cry, not yet. She just puts her hand over her mouth and breathes through her fingers, and the camera holds on her, and the audience understands that this is what hope looks like when it arrives after months of despair. Small, fragile, terrifying, because hope, when you have been without it, does not feel like joy. It feels like fear. It feels like the ground might shift again. It feels like you are not allowed to believe it yet, and the film honors that fear, does not rush past it, lets Brooke sit in it, lets the audience sit in it, because the verdict has not come yet, and until it does, hope is just another thing that can be taken away. And the verdict comes, not guilty, 2 words, spoken by the foreperson in a flat, procedural voice that makes no allowance for the enormity of what those words mean to the woman sitting at the defense table. Not guilty. And Brooke Wyndham stands, and her knees buckle slightly, and she grabs the edge of the table, and then she turns to Emmett, and she turns to Callahan, and she turns to Elle, and she says thank you, and her voice breaks on the second syllable, and Elle takes her hand, and the 2 women hold on to each other for a moment that lasts 3 seconds and contains everything. And the courtroom moves around them, lawyers packing files, jurors standing, the judge gathering papers, the machinery of justice resetting itself for the next case, the next body, the next life fed through the system. And the film lingers on that indifference, on the way the institution processes a woman's freedom the same way it processes a parking ticket, efficiently, without emotion, without acknowledgement that anything sacred just occurred. And Elle watches the machinery reset, and she understands, in that moment, something about the system she has spent 3 acts trying to enter. It did not free Brooke because it is just. It freed Brooke because a woman in pink walked in with a knowledge of hair chemicals and a refusal to be small. And that distinction matters. That distinction is the entire film. And Elle packs her bag, and she looks at Callahan, and he nods at her, and the nod is warm, and it is professional, and it contains no acknowledgement of the hand on the waist, the closed door, the smile that was not a smile. And Elle nods back, and she walks out, and the audience walks out with her, and the sunlight hits her face on the courthouse steps, and she does not look triumphant. She looks tired. She looks relieved. She looks like a person who has done the thing and is now allowed to rest. And the film gives her that rest, gives her the walk down the steps, gives her the sky, gives her the silence, and the audience breathes. And for a moment, everything is still, but the film is not done, because the verdict freed Brooke, but it did not free Elle. And the question the film still owes the audience, the question that has been running underneath every scene since the first act, is this: now that the case is over, now that the proof has been delivered, now that the institution has extracted what it needed from her, what happens to Elle Woods? Does she stay? Does she leave? Does she become the gray woman Harvard tried to build? Or does she walk out of this building in her pink and never look back? And the answer is coming, and it is not what you expect. The trial is over, and the film does something unusual for a comedy in its aftermath. It lets the silence sit. Most movies, after the big victory, rush towards celebration. Music swells. Characters hug. The audience is told, through every cinematic signal available, that this is the peak, the summit, the moment you are supposed to feel triumphant. And Legally Blonde gives you the verdict, gives you Brooke's freedom, gives you the sunlight on the courthouse steps. And then it keeps going, because the film understands something that most underdog stories refuse to acknowledge. Winning the case does not fix the system. Brooke is free, and that is real, and that matters, and the film does not diminish it. But the institution that put her in that cell is still standing. The procedures that built the prosecution's timeline are still in place. The machinery that processes human lives through fluorescent lit rooms and calls it justice is still humming, and Callahan is still behind his desk. And this is the part of the film that most viewers skim past, because it is uncomfortable, because it asks a question the audience would rather not answer. If the system only works when an exceptional individual forces it to, is the system working? And the film does not answer that question directly. It does not need to. It simply shows you Callahan in his office after the verdict, pouring a glass of scotch, looking satisfied, looking proud of his team, looking like a man who has just won a case and added another line to his resume. And the hand that touched Elle's waist is holding that glass. And the film lets you see that, lets you hold both truths at once. The victory is real, the violation is real, and they coexist, and no amount of not guilty verdicts changes that. And Elle knows it. The film shows her knowing it in the way she walks past his office door without stopping, in the way she does not go in to celebrate with the team, in the way she keeps walking down the hallway, past the portraits of dead men on the walls, past the marble and the brass and the institutional weight of a building that was not built for her and will never be built for her. And she walks, and she walks, and she does not look back. And Emmett finds her. Of course Emmett finds her. He finds her outside, on the steps, in the late afternoon light that makes everything look like a memory even while it is still happening. And he does not say congratulations. He does not say we did it. He sits down next to her, and they are quiet for a moment, and the film lets them be quiet, lets the audience sit in the silence with them, in the specific, exhausted, post-battle silence of two people who have been through something together and do not yet know what it means. And then Emmett says something small, something that is not a declaration of love, not a grand romantic gesture, not a speech. He says something like, "You were extraordinary in there." And Elle looks at him, and she says, "I know." And she says it without arrogance, without performance, without the need for him to confirm it. She simply states it as a fact, the way you state the weather. "I was extraordinary. I know." And the film holds on that moment. And it is the most romantic moment in the entire movie, because it is the first time Elle has validated herself without asking anyone else to do it for her. And Emmett smiles, and the smile is not surprised. It is the smile of a person who always knew, who always saw her, who simply waited for her to see herself. And the film does not kiss them. Not here. Not yet. It gives them something better than a kiss. It gives them mutual recognition. Two people on a set of steps, in the fading light, looking at each other and seeing the whole person. Not the performance, not the potential, the person. And the audience understands that whatever comes between them next, whatever shape their relationship takes, it will be built on this, on the foundation of being seen. And that is rarer than romance. And the film knows it, and it trusts you to know it too. And then Warner comes. And this is the scene the film could have skipped, the scene that adds nothing to the plot, that resolves no legal thread, that moves no case forward. And it is the most important scene in the final act. Warner approaches Elle, and he is not smug. He is not dismissive. He is, for the first time in the film, uncertain. And he says something. Maybe it is an apology. Maybe it is an acknowledgement. The film does not give him a monologue, does not let him explain himself or justify what he said in that restaurant 2 years ago. He simply looks at Elle, and he says her name, and the way he says it contains everything he cannot articulate. And Elle looks at him, and the film holds on her face. And what the audience sees there is not anger, not triumph, not the satisfaction of the woman who proved the man wrong. It is something sadder, something more complex. It is the recognition that Warner was not the villain. silent. Warner was the first person to say the thing the world had been thinking. Warner was the voice that gave shape to the fear Elle had been carrying silently. And forgiving him does not mean what he said was okay. It means understanding that he was a symptom, not the disease. And Elle says something back, something kind, something that does not absolve him but releases him. And she walks away. And Warner stands there, on the steps, in his gray suit, and the camera holds on him for a moment, and you see it in his face. The knowledge that he misread her, that he looked at the most complete person he ever met and saw only a fragment. And that knowledge is going to follow him for a long time. And the film does not punish him for it. It simply lets him carry it. And then Vivian appears, briefly, in the background. She does not approach. She does not speak. She simply nods at Elle from across the courtyard. And Elle nods back. And that is their resolution. Not friendship, not forgiveness. Just the acknowledgement that they saw each other. That they survived the same room. That the institution tried to turn them into competitors, and they refused, eventually, to play. And the nod contains all of that. And the film moves on. And then the final stretch. The graduation. The robes. The caps. The lawn. And the film gives you the ceremony, but it does not give you the speech. Not in the way you expect. Because Legally Blonde does not end with Elle standing at a podium telling the audience what they should learn from her journey. It ends smaller. It ends with Elle walking across that stage, accepting her degree, shaking the hand of the university president, and the camera catches her face in the moment between walking on and walking off. And she is not smiling for the audience. She is not performing achievement. She is looking at the degree in her hand, and her expression is complicated. Proud, yes, but also something else. Something that looks like grief. The grief of a person who has won the thing she fought for and is realizing that the fight changed her in ways she cannot undo. She is a lawyer now. She survived Harvard. She proved Warner wrong and Callahan wrong and every gray suit in every gray room wrong. And she is also someone who will never again walk into a space without scanning it for threats. Someone who will always know what it costs to be the only pink in a sea of black. Someone who will carry the hand on the waist, the laughter in the lecture hall, the bunny ears, the closed door, all of it layered under the robe like sediment. And the film does not pretend the victory erases the cost. It simply lets her walk across the stage carrying both. And the audience watches her walk. And the sun is setting. And the cap is in her hand. And Bruiser is somewhere in the crowd, probably in Paulette's lap. And the film is almost over. And there is one more scene. One final image. And it is going to say the thing the entire film has been saying. The thing it has been arguing in every frame. In every pink outfit. In every salon conversation. In every bend and snap and perm fact and quiet exhale. And the audience is about to hear it. And it is not going to sound like a speech. It is going to sound like a whisper. And it is going to land in the chest like a hand on the heart. And it is going to be enough. And there is one final thread the film resolves in these closing minutes that it has been weaving since the very first scene. And it belongs to Paulette. Because Paulette is not just Elle's refuge. Paulette is the film's argument made flesh. Paulette is the woman who never went to Harvard, who never put on a gray blazer, who never learned the vocabulary of institutional power, and who is nonetheless complete. Whole. Enough. And in the final act, the film gives Paulette her own small victory. Not a courtroom victory. Not a legal triumph. A personal one. Paulette gets the thing she wanted. The man. The recognition. The moment where someone looks at her and says, "You are exactly right, and I see you, and you do not need to change a single thing." And Elle is there for it. Standing in the salon, in the pink, watching her friend get the thing she has been hoping for across 3 acts of nail appointments and quiet conversations and mutual holding on. And the film gives this moment weight. Does not rush it. Does not treat it as a subplot resolution to be checked off. Because Paulette's happiness is the film's proof of concept. It is the evidence that Elle's way of being in the world, warm, loud, pink, socially intelligent, unapologetically specific, is not a limitation to be overcome. It is a life, a full life, a life that does not require a Juris Doctor to be valid. And the film needs the audience to understand that, because without Paulette's resolution, the message of Legally Blonde becomes, work hard, get the degree, prove them wrong. And with it, the message becomes something more radical. Something that says, the woman in the salon chair and the woman in the courtroom are the same woman. And neither version is more real than the other. And you do not have to choose. And you do not have to earn the right to be both. And Bruiser is there, of course, in Paulette's lap, or in Elle's bag, or trotting across the frame in that way small dogs do when the camera is not quite ready for them. And the film lets Bruiser be a small, warm, living reminder that some things do not need to be justified. Some things just are. A dog, a friendship, a pink outfit, a Tuesday afternoon. The film has spent its entire runtime arguing that the small things are not small, that the frivolous is not frivolous, that the world's hierarchy of what matters is a construction, and the only thing that is truly frivolous is the cruelty of telling someone their way of loving, their way of knowing, their way of being is not enough. And as the graduation crowd disperses, as the robes come off, as the caps are tossed or tucked under arms, the film pulls back. Slowly, gently, the way you pull back from someone someone you love, giving them space, giving them air, giving them the room to be a person outside the frame. And Elle is in the distance now, walking, not toward the camera, not away from it, just walking, in the pink, with the dog, with the degree, with the knowledge of what she survived and what she cost herself and what she is now on the other side of all of it. And the film does not follow her. It lets her go, and the audience watches her go, and the screen holds on the empty space where she was. And the feeling in the theater, in the living room, in the headphones, is not triumph. It is tenderness, the specific, aching tenderness of watching someone you have come to love walk into the next chapter of their life, knowing you cannot follow, knowing the story is theirs now, knowing they will be okay. Not because the film promised you they would be, because you watched them build it, brick by brick, pink brick by pink brick, and the building holds. The final image of Legally Blonde is Elle Woods in her graduation robe, and the film does not give her a podium. It does not give her a microphone. It does not let her stand in front of a crowd and deliver a thesis statement about what she learned. Robert Luketic understood, in the editing room, that a speech would reduce the ending to a lesson. And this film is not a lesson. It is an argument. And arguments do not end with a summary. They end with a silence that makes the audience sit with what they have just been shown. So the final image is small. Elle walking, the robe catching the breeze, the cap in her hand, not on her head, because she has already taken it off, already stepped out of the uniform, already begun the process of being Elle Woods again rather than Harvard Law graduate number 412. And Bruiser is there, because of course Bruiser is there, because the film has never let you forget that this woman's life includes a dog, includes a salon, includes a group of loud, loving, unimpressed friends who will call her tonight and ask if she wants to get margaritas. And the camera pulls back, and the frame widens, and Elle becomes smaller in the shot, and the world becomes bigger, and the film is saying, without words, that she is not the center of the universe. She is a person in it, and that is enough, and that has always been enough. And the screen fades, and the credits roll over a pop song, and the audience sits in the dark of the theater or the glow of their living room, and something settles in their chest that they cannot immediately name. And the reason they cannot name it is that the ending is not triumphant in the way they were promised. It is not the fist pump, the slow clap, the standing ovation. It is quieter than that, sadder than that, more honest than that. And the honesty is this: Elle Woods won, and winning cost her something she will never get back. And the film does not pretend otherwise. And that refusal to pretend is what makes the ending matter. Here is what the ending actually means, and this is the reading that almost no review of this film commits to. The ending of Legally Blonde is not about Elle proving she belongs at Harvard. She proved that in the second act, with the perm, with the bend and snap, with the quiet accumulation of small, brilliant observations that no one else in the room could make. The ending is about something else entirely. The ending is about Elle choosing to stay in a world that will never fully accept her, not because she needs the world to accept her, but because she has decided that her presence in that world is not contingent on the world's approval. She is not staying for Callahan. She is not staying for the degree. She is not staying for Warner or Vivian or the institution or the marble hallways or the portraits of dead men on the walls. She is staying because she has decided that the law is a tool she can use, and that using it does not require her to become the tool's shape. She can be a lawyer and be pink. She can be a lawyer and go to the salon on Thursdays. She can be a lawyer and carry a chihuahua in her handbag and cry at commercial breaks and talk too fast and laugh too loud and be completely, totally, irreducibly herself. And the ending is the film granting her that permission. Not the institution, not Callahan, not Warner. The film itself, the narrative, the structure, the camera, pulling back, saying, yes, you can be all of it. You do not have to choose. And that permission, granted by the story to its own character, is the most radical act Legally Blonde performs. Because every other character in the film told Elle she had to choose. Be smart or be pink. Be serious or be warm. Be Harvard or be yourself. And the ending says, no, all of it, every piece, at the same time. And the audience feels the permission land, even if they do not know why. Even if they walk out of the theater saying, fun movie, great Reese Witherspoon, without articulating the specific, personal way the ending just unlocked something in them. Because the permission is transferable. The film grants it to Elle, and in granting it to her, grants it to you, whoever you are, whatever room you have been shrinking yourself to fit, whatever piece of yourself you have been told to cut away. The ending says, keep it, keep all of it, walk in whole. The first theme, the one that runs through every frame, every scene, every choice of costume and camera angle and musical cue, is identity as wholeness versus identity as performance. And the film argues, across its entire runtime, that the world demands performance. It demands that you select the acceptable parts of yourself and present those, and lock the rest in a closet and smile, and say thank you for the opportunity, and pretend that the closet is not there. And Elle's journey is the journey of a woman who tried the performance, who bought the glasses, who pulled her hair back, who learned the vocabulary and the cadence and the choreography of authority. And the film film shows you that the performance worked. Elle succeeded. She passed the tests. She cracked the case. She stood in the courtroom and was taken seriously. And the film also shows you that the performance was killing her. Slowly, quietly, in the way all performances kill the performer. By separating the self into the one who is seen and the one who is hidden, and making the hidden one smaller with every passing day until you cannot remember what was hidden in the first place. And the climax of the film is not the verdict. The climax is the morning after the Callahan scene, when Elle wakes up and looks at the closet and reaches past the gray and puts on the pink. And that choice is the thesis, not a speech, not a declaration, a hand reaching past the acceptable option and choosing the true one. And the film builds its entire architecture around that single gesture. Every scene before it makes the choice cost more. Every scene after it makes the choice matter more. And the theme lands not because the film tells you identity should be whole. It lands because it shows you the specific, daily, exhausting cost of fragmentation, and then shows you one woman deciding on a Tuesday morning to stop paying it. The second theme is institutional power and the violence of definition. And this is the theme that elevates Legally Blonde above the genre it inhabits. Because the film is not arguing that Elle is smart despite being blonde. It is arguing that the category blonde is a tool of control. That Warner, that Callahan, that the lecture hall, that the gray blazers and the marble floors and the specific, narrow vocabulary of Harvard law are all instruments of a single argument. We will tell you what intelligence looks like, and if you do not match the description, you do not get to be here. And the violence of that argument is not physical. It is definitional. It is the violence of a system that gets to write the dictionary and then grades you on your fluency in its language. And the film shows you that violence in every scene. In the laughter that is not quite laughter. In the compliment that is not quite a compliment. In the hand on the waist that is framed as warmth. In the admission that requires a video essay because the numbers are not enough. In the trial where a woman's freedom depends on whether 12 strangers can be made to understand hair chemistry. And the film does not resolve this theme, does not fix the institution, does not burn Harvard to the ground. It simply shows you one woman surviving it, walking through it, carrying her whole self through the narrow door and refusing, stubbornly, pinkly, to leave any part of herself on the threshold. And that refusal is not a revolution. It is not a system change. It is one person in one room saying no. And the film argues that this is where every revolution starts. Not with a speech, not with a protest, with one person deciding that the definition someone else wrote does not apply. And the audience carries that out of the theater. And the audience applies it to their own rooms, their own closets, their own gray blazers. And the film does not need to tell them to. The ending already said it. In the silence, in the pullback, in the pink robe catching the breeze. And the credits roll, and the song plays, and the audience sits with it, and something shifts. Small, quiet, real. So the verdict. And I am going to be honest with you, because you deserve honesty after 10 acts and 17,000 words, because this film earned both the praise and the criticism, and giving it only one would be a disservice to what Robert Luketic and Reese Witherspoon actually built here. The story works. Not perfectly, not without seams, but it works. And it works because it understands that an underdog narrative is only as strong as the specificity of its wound, and Elle Woods' wound is specific. It is not, she is underestimated. It is, the person she loved most confirmed her private fear that she is a decoration. And that specificity gives every scene afterward a psychological engine that pure plot mechanics could never provide. The characters work. Reese Witherspoon's performance is the load-bearing wall of the entire structure. And without her specific combination of warmth, precision, and comic timing, the screenplay's more sentimental beats would collapse under their own weight. She grounds every moment. She makes the comedy feel lived in and the drama feel earned. And she does it without ever winking at the audience, without ever stepping outside the character to say, "Look how charming I am." Jennifer Coolidge, Luke Wilson, Selma Blair, Holland Taylor. Every supporting player finds a frequency and stays on it. And the film benefits enormously from that consistency. And the screenplay, by Karen McCullough Lutz and Kirsten Smith, working from Amanda Brown's novel, does something genuinely difficult. It makes a comedy about structural sexism without ever becoming a lecture. It trusts the audience to feel the argument rather than hear it. And that trust is rare. And it is the reason this film has lasted 25 years, while every imitator faded within 18 months. But here is the weakness, and it is a real one, and I will not soften it. The film's third act, from the Callahan scene to the trial, compresses its legal proceedings into a montage-like sequence that sacrifices procedural specificity for emotional momentum. The perm argument is introduced, explained, and deployed within roughly 12 minutes of screen time, and in that compression, the screenplay skips over the actual adversarial process that would make the argument feel genuinely contested. The prosecution is never given a strong rebuttal to the hair chemistry claim. The judge never grills the defense on the timeline. timeline. The jury deliberation is skipped entirely, and this matters because the film's own argument is that systems are slow, grinding, procedural, and indifferent, and then the film's climax resolves in a way that is fast, clean, and emotionally satisfying. There is a contradiction between the film's thematic argument and its structural resolution. The system the film critiques is bureaucratic and dehumanizing, but the system the film shows in the courtroom delivers justice in a single afternoon with a not guilty verdict and a standing ovation from the gallery. And that contradiction weakens the ending by a degree. Not fatally, not enough to undermine the emotional truth of Elle's journey, but enough to make the final 20 minutes feel slightly less earned than the first 80. And I say this not to diminish the film, but to honor it, because a film this smart deserves a critic who takes its craft seriously enough to find the one seam that does not quite hold. Now, who should watch this film? Not fans of comedy, not people who like Reese Witherspoon. I will be specific. If you have ever walked into a room and felt the temperature change because you did not match the expected shape of the person who belongs there, this film is for you. If you have ever been told by a partner, a professor, a parent, a boss, that you would be more impressive if you were a little less yourself, this film is for you. If you appreciated Erin Brockovich for the same reason, not the legal procedural, but the portrait of a woman whose intelligence is coded in a language the institution does not speak, then Legally Blonde is the warmer, funnier, pinker sibling of that story, and it deserves your attention. If you are drawn to films about the cost of code switching, about the violence of being defined by someone else's vocabulary, about the quiet heroism of refusing to fragment yourself for other people's comfort, then this film is not a comedy you watch once. It is a mirror you look into every few years, and each time, it shows you something new. And if you have never seen it, if you dismissed it because of the poster, because of the tagline, because someone told you it was a fluff piece about a sorority girl, then I am asking you, directly, to sit down tonight and watch it with the sound on, and the phone in the other room, and the expectation of fluff left at the door. Because the film that is waiting for you on the other side of that expectation is not the film you were promised. And it is better, and it is angrier, and it is more tender, and it has been waiting 25 years for you to take it seriously. Tell me in the comments whether the ending landed for you, or whether the Callahan scene left something unresolved that the graduation could not quite fix. I want to know, genuinely, because this film has been in my head for a long time, and the way it lives in your head might be different from the way it lives in mine. And that difference is the whole point of talking about movies in the first place. And so the final thought, the one I want you to carry out of this video the way Elle carries Bruiser out of that courthouse. Small, warm, alive. Legally Blonde is not a movie about a woman proving she is smart. It is a movie about a woman proving that smart was never the point. The point was always whole. The point was always, you do not owe anyone a smaller version of yourself. You do not owe the room your silence. You do not owe the institution your color. You do not owe the person who broke your mirror the satisfaction of never gluing it back together. You get to be all of it. The pink and the precedent. The salon and the statute. The dog and the degree. The laugh that is too loud and the mind that is too sharp, and the heart that breaks at commercial breaks, and the spine that walks back into the building that hurt her because someone else's freedom depends on her showing up. All of it at the same time, without apology, without editing, without reaching past the pink for the gray blazer. You get to walk in whole. And if the room laughs, the room is wrong. And if the room is quiet, the room is listening. And if the room is empty, you still walked in whole. And that is the only verdict that has ever mattered. And that is Legally Blonde, not the postcard, the argument. And the argument holds. 25 years later, it holds. And it will hold 25 years from now, because the room is still gray and the door is still narrow. And there is still someone out there, right now, standing in front of it, holding a pink pen, holding a small dog, holding their breath, deciding whether to walk in as the person they are or the person they were told to be. And this film, this loud, funny, furious, tender, imperfect, pink, glorious film, leans over to that person and whispers the only line that matters. You are already enough. Now go make them see it. Before we close the book on this film, we have to talk about the numbers, because the financial reality of Legally Blonde is just as radical as its thematic argument. The film was made for $18 million. In the context of the year 2001, that was a modest budget for a studio comedy, but it came with immense studio anxiety. MGM was terrified. The executives looked at a script about a sorority girl in pink who goes to law school and saw a niche product. They saw a chick flick. They saw a movie that would play to a narrow demographic and vanish by week 3. They did not see a cultural reset. They did not see a film that would spawn a Broadway musical, a sequel, and a generation of lawyers who cite a fictional character as their inspiration. They saw $18 million of risk attached to a premise they fundamentally did not respect. And that lack of respect is exactly why the aesthetic is so aggressively pink. The filmmakers knew the studio was embarrassed, so they leaned into the very thing the studio studio wanted to hide. And then the movie finally opened in theaters. And it did not just succeed, it completely exploded. Legally Blonde grossed nearly $142 million at the global box office. That is an almost eightfold return on investment, a multiplier that studio accountants dream about but rarely see outside of established superhero franchises. In its opening weekend alone, it took in over $22 million, completely defying the tracking data that said audiences would not show up for a female-led comedy in the middle of the summer blockbuster season. The studios had scheduled it as counter-programming, a throwaway title to catch audiences uninterested in the action movies dominating the multiplexes. But the audience did not treat it as counter-programming. They treated it as a massive cultural event. Word of mouth spread not because the marketing tricked people into theaters, but because the film delivered a specific, resonant emotional truth that viewers immediately wanted to share. It was the cinematic equivalent of a secret past across a crowded lunch table, and that organic momentum carried it straight through the entire summer. But the raw box office number, impressive as it is, only tells half the story of what those earnings actually meant. The financial success of Legally Blonde shattered a very specific, very persistent Hollywood myth. The myth that stories centered on women's interior lives, stories that deal with the social architecture of femininity, are inherently less profitable than stories centered on male action or male angst. By making nearly 8 times its budget, the film proved that the frivolous concerns of women, the dynamics of sororities, the politics of salons, the emotional labor of navigating male-dominated spaces, were actually universal concerns, provided they were treated with genuine respect rather than condescension. It forced the industry to look at its own ledger and realize that its bias was costing it hundreds of millions of dollars. And it made Reese Witherspoon, who fought relentlessly to ensure Elle was never played as a caricature, one of the most bankable stars on the planet, using that financial leverage to champion more female-driven narratives. And if you extend the timeline beyond that initial theatrical run, the return on that $18 million investment becomes almost incalculable. The DVD sales alone generated tens of millions more, turning the film into a permanent fixture in college dorm rooms and living rooms across the world. The merchandising, the quotes that entered the permanent cultural lexicon, the Halloween costumes worn by millions of women who just wanted to feel that specific brand of armor joy for one night a year. All of it stems from a studio taking a reluctant gamble on a script they thought was too silly to matter. The financial triumph of Legally Blonde is the ultimate proof of the film's own thesis. The institution, in this case, the Hollywood studio system, looked at a project coated in pink and assumed it lacked serious value. They graded it on a curve they designed and expected it to fail. And the project simply ignored their metrics, walked into the marketplace, and generated a fortune that forced the institution to rewrite its definition of value.